The world behind the walls of convents has always been shrouded in mystery. Since the Middle Ages, nuns have been figures of devotion and sacrifice, dedicating their lives to prayer and religious service. But what really happened inside these sacred enclosures? Throughout history, stories have emerged that challenge the idealized image of monastic life. Tales of escapes, clandestine encounters, and well-kept secrets reveal a far more complex reality. Is it true that some nuns defied the strict rules of enclosure? To what extent were discipline and vows of chastity truly respected? Today, we will explore the lives of these women and uncover some of the most shocking episodes that have remained in the shadows for centuries. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you will discover hidden stories, forgotten secrets, and truths that have been silenced over time. During the Middle Ages, female convents multiplied throughout Europe. Initially, these spaces were intended for women who wished to dedicate their lives to God, but they soon became the obligatory destination for those who could not marry or whom their families considered problematic. Many entered against their will, forced by family decisions or circumstances that left them with no other choice. Once inside, the lives of nuns were marked by discipline and sacrifice. From dawn until night, their routine was governed by prayers, manual labor, and religious studies. Although women's education in medieval society was limited, inside the convent, they were allowed to learn to read and write, something that few women outside these walls could do. However, not everything was harmony and devotion. Over the centuries, numerous cases have been recorded where the rigidity of monastic life was challenged. The strict rules imposed within convents led some nuns to seek ways to evade them, either through small infractions or more drastic decisions such as escape. For many, the vow of chastity represented the greatest challenge. Although the church imposed severe rules to prevent any contact with the outside world, some nuns found ways to circumvent these restrictions. During religious festivals or public events, they took the opportunity to blend into the crowd and, in some cases, disappear without a trace. But breaking the rules did not always involve fleeing. In some convents, ingenious methods were developed to communicate with the outside world and maintain forbidden encounters. Some nuns used discreet signals, such as lights in windows, to send messages to those who knew how to interpret their meaning. These secret codes allowed clandestine meetings to be coordinated without raising suspicion. The location of convents also played a crucial role in these events. In many cases, male monasteries were situated near female convents, facilitating communication between monks and nuns. A simple exchange of glances could be enough to initiate a connection that would eventually lead to a forbidden relationship. But not all secrets hidden behind convent walls were related to clandestine encounters. In some monasteries, corruption and abuse of power became common practices. There were cases where abbesses exercised absolute control over their companions, imposing their own rules and manipulating those under their authority. One of the most notorious examples is the monastery of San Ambrosio, a convent that became the epicenter of a scandal that shook the church. For years, rumors circulated in secrecy about what was happening inside, until they finally came to light through historical documents and testimonies that managed to survive the passage of time. Maria Luisa, the abbess of San Ambrosio, was an enigmatic and charismatic figure. It was said that she possessed great beauty and an innate talent for persuasion. Under her leadership, the convent became a place where traditional rules were completely ignored. Chastity and abstinence ceased to be a priority, replaced by a more indulgent vision of monastic life. To justify her actions, Maria Luisa claimed that her decisions were guided by a divine connection. She argued that her interpretation of faith granted her a special status within the convent, and that her followers should obey her without question. With this argument, she consolidated absolute power, which she used to maintain her dominance over the religious community. The accounts of what happened inside San Ambrosio became increasingly alarming. Not only were there reports of forbidden relationships within the convent, but also of secret connections with priests from the nearby monastery. These alliances strengthened the abbess's control and allowed her to maintain her influence without fear of repercussions. However, not all the nuns were willing to remain silent. Some began to question Maria Luisa's actions and demand explanations, but any attempt at rebellion was quickly suppressed. The abbess used psychological manipulation and fear to ensure that no one dared to challenge her authority. Despite her efforts to maintain control, the truth could not remain hidden forever. Over time, rumors reached the ears of ecclesiastical authorities, who finally decided to intervene. A formal investigation was carried out, and after an ecclesiastical trial, Maria Luisa and the priests involved were found guilty of multiple violations of religious norms. The punishments were severe, but the scandal had already left an indelible mark on the history of the Church. To prevent the institution's reputation from being further damaged, many details of the case were suppressed and archived in restricted access documents. However, some records managed to surface, allowing us to learn what really happened in San Ambrosio. This case is just one example of how, throughout history, monastic life did not always conform to the image of purity and devotion projected to the outside world. Despite the strict rules imposed, many nuns found ways to defy them and follow their own desires, whether through small infractions or more radical decisions. If you want to continue discovering more hidden stories and secrets from the past, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That way, you'll be the first to know about the most shocking stories in history. The stories of convents do not only include scandals and escapes, but also events that challenge the religious beliefs of the time. Some of the most unsettling accounts involve alleged supernatural phenomena within these enclosures, leading the Church to investigate cases of possessions, miracles, and mystical visions. One of the most famous cases is that of the nun Benedetta Carlini, an Italian religious figure from the 17th century. From an early age, Benedetta displayed an unusual religious fervor and claimed to have experienced divine visions. Her accounts of encounters with angels and celestial messages attracted the Church's attention, which initially considered her a potential saint. But over time, her story took an unexpected turn. Some of her fellow nuns began to suspect that her visions were nothing more than a fraud. Additionally, it was discovered that Benedetta maintained a secret relationship with another nun, which violated the vows of chastity. The ecclesiastical authorities decided to intervene and, after a series of interrogations, determined that everything had been a manipulation on her part. As punishment, Benedetta was removed from her position and spent the rest of her life in isolation within the convent. This case demonstrates how, on many occasions, the mystical experiences of some nuns were viewed with skepticism and, in some cases, fear. Any behavior that challenged established norms could be considered the work of the devil, leading to accusations of heresy and witchcraft. Within some convents, exorcisms were a common practice. When a nun displayed signs of rebellion or behaved unusually, it was assumed that she was possessed by evil forces. In these cases, priests performed purification rituals to expel the spirits that supposedly tormented her. Some of these sessions were extremely violent and put the affected person's life at risk. The case of the possessed nuns of Loudun in France is one of the most shocking in history. In addition to escapes, convents were also the setting for important conspiracies. In some monasteries, the most influential nuns formed secret alliances to manipulate decisions within the convent. These alliances could have political, economic, or even personal purposes. One example of this occurred in a convent in Florence in the 15th century, where a group of nuns formed an influence network to ensure that one of them was elected as the Mother Superior. This conspiracy included bribing clergy members and forging documents. When they finally achieved their goal, they established a regime of privileges for their group and excluded the nuns who were not part of their circle. These internal conflicts show that although life in convents was based on spirituality, it was not free from human ambitions. Another little-known aspect is the role that convents played in the production and preservation of knowledge. Although monasteries are traditionally associated with contemplative life, many nuns were scholars, writers, and scientists at a time when access to knowledge was limited for women. A prominent example is Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, a Mexican nun of the 17th century who became one of the most important writers of her time. Despite the restrictions imposed by the Church, Sor Juana dedicated her life to study and writing, producing works that challenged the norms of her era. However, her thirst for knowledge was seen as a threat, and she was eventually forced to abandon her studies and submit to the strict discipline of the convent. This case was not unique. Throughout history, many women found in convents a way to access education and develop their intellect in a society that denied them these rights. However, this access to knowledge was not always well received, and in some cases, those who demonstrated exceptional intelligence were punished for being considered as challenging the Church's authority. In addition to knowledge, convents also played a fundamental role in medicine and the care of the sick. Many religious orders established hospitals and medical care centers where nuns served as nurses and healers. One of the most notable cases is that of Hildegard of Bingen, a German nun of the 12th century who stood out as a physician, botanist, and philosopher. Her knowledge of medicinal plants and natural treatments made her one of the most influential figures of her time. However, her work was not always recognized, and on several occasions, she had to face the distrust of ecclesiastical authorities. The role of nuns in medicine also generated controversy. In some convents, the sisters carried out medical procedures that the Church considered questionable, such as the administration of natural anesthesia or the use of herbal remedies that were not approved by official doctrine. In certain cases, some nuns were even accused of practicing magic or witchcraft due to their knowledge of plants and alternative treatments. Beyond medicine, convents were also centers of artistic production. Sacred music, painting, and literature found a place within monasteries, where some nuns managed to stand out as composers and artists. A fascinating case is that of Sister Eustochia, an Italian nun of the 15th century who dedicated her life to painting. Her works, characterized by a unique and expressive style, were highly valued in her time, although many of them were attributed to male artists due to the belief that women could not be great painters. These examples demonstrate that life in convents was much more complex than is generally thought. They were not only places of prayer and penance, but also spaces of conflict, learning, and resistance. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to keep exploring these fascinating topics. Convents, although considered spaces of devotion and spirituality, were also the setting for unusual events and stories that defy logic. Among these, cases of mystical visions and supernatural experiences lived by some nuns throughout history stand out. One of the most intriguing episodes occurred in the 17th century in a convent in Italy. It is said that a nun named Sister Maria de la Cruz began writing letters in an unknown language, claiming that she had been possessed by a spirit that revealed secrets from the beyond. Church authorities tried to decipher the text, but for centuries, no one could understand their meaning. It was only a few years ago that, using modern technology, researchers managed to analyze the content of these letters, discovering that they were written in a combination of alphabets and symbols from various ancient languages. Another famous case is that of the Portuguese nun Sister Maria de Jesus, who claimed to have had visions in which she traveled in spirit to distant places. Her detailed descriptions of unknown lands astonished the chroniclers of the time, as she accurately described the geography and customs of regions she had never physically visited. These events led the Church to take measures in some convents to prevent nuns from spreading stories that could be considered heretical. In certain cases, nuns who claimed to have visions were subjected to rigorous interrogations, and if their experiences were deemed contrary to doctrine, they could be punished with isolation or even excommunication. Besides these mystical experiences, some convents became the center of legends about spectral presences and unexplained events. In a convent in Spain, the story is told of a nun who, after being unjustly locked in a cell, died in solitude. Since then, several generations of nuns have claimed to have seen her shadow wandering the convent's hallways, especially on stormy nights. These stories, although shrouded in mystery, reflect the complexity of convent life. While some interpret them as supernatural phenomena, others see them as the result of the psychological and emotional pressure that many nuns experience within monasteries. On the other hand, in the social aspect, convents played a fundamental role in the protection and education of women in difficult times. In many places, monasteries served as refuges for women fleeing violence or who had no other options in a society that limited their opportunities. Despite strict rules, some nuns managed to defy established norms and leave their mark on history. Many of them dedicated their lives to helping those in need, founding hospitals and schools that still endure today. Over time, life in convents has changed significantly. While in past centuries they were closed institutions with rigid rules, today many monasteries have opened their doors to the outside world, allowing society to learn about their history and legacy. However, the stories of what happened within their walls continue to generate fascination. Each story, each testimony, and each mystery remind us that convents were much more than simple places of prayer. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to keep exploring fascinating topics.